power of darkness is more than just a superstition.
From the 1980s to the end of the 90s, both the US and the UK had a fear that would lead to the false accusation and imprisonment of innocent people. A fear that led to prejudice that still stains our society. A fear that sold a lot of books and filled television talk shows. A fear that would ultimately ruin a lot of lives. This fear was of so-called satanic cults. These cults allegedly wanted children for satanic ritual abuse. We're going to look into the origin of this belief, why Satanism specifically, and whether there was any truth to the allegations and prejudice. America, 1980. America has endured the Manson family, the People's Temple, and the Children of God. The American people are familiar with the entity of a cult, and so are the media. Films such as The Omen, The Exorcist, and Rosemary's Baby were all massive box office successes. Heavy metal bands such as Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Slayer, and Judas Priest would use satanic imagery and regularly refer to the devil. The use of this imagery in the media would create a conflict between Christian groups and fans of the horror films and heavy metal bands. Iconic fantasy tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons also came under fire during this period due to its representation of sorcery and occult elements. Matters were made worse for the game and its players due to the death of James Dallas Egbert III. Majoring in computer science at the age of 16 in Michigan State University, his disappearance into the steam tunnels beneath the university, and then later on to New Orleans, had been linked to his participation in Dungeons & Dragons. However, it was later explained that Egbert suffered from mental illness, and these disappearances were suicide attempts. Egbert died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 1980. By November 1st, 1980, Satanism, the devil, and anti-Christian imagery was part of the American psyche. However, with the release of a book, a portion of the American people would discover a fear they had no idea lurked within them. Michelle Remembers was a biographical account of repressed childhood memories, co-written by Michelle Smith and her psychiatrist Lawrence Pazder, who had been treating Smith for depression, and together they would later marry. The book describes the alleged abuse that Michelle Smith experienced by her mother and co-members of a satanic cult during the mid-50s. The book, now discredited, became a bestseller. Together with high media coverage and a book tour, the word began to spread about Michelle and the fictitious satanic abuse that she allegedly experienced as a child. The first of the accusations to go to court stood against a selection of preschools and daycare centres. These accusations against the safe havens where people would leave their children would of course hit very hard and very fast for the concern of the general public. In 1983, McMartin Preschool in California was the first of many centres to be falsely accused of satanic ritual abuse. It started when a mother of a 2.5-year-old claimed her son had been sodomized at the daycare centre. Several hundred children would then be interviewed in a highly suggestive manner. This resulted in over 300 children claiming abuse, with claims of flying witches, hot air balloon travel, underground tunnels, and even Chuck Norris being mentioned. It didn't matter, however, how far-fetched these claims were, nor that the original mother was later found to suffer paranoid schizophrenia, and later died of alcoholism before the preliminary hearing ended. The claims had been made, parents had been panicked, and America has already started a satanic hysteria. Another case, Francis and Dan Keller of Oak Hill Daycare were falsely accused of sexually abusing a 3-year-old, as well as claims of lacing Kool-Aid with blood, forcing children to watch sexual acts, and engage in animal dismemberment. The Kellers spent 21 years in jail until being exonerated in 2013. Between 1984 and 1985, a series of rapes, burglaries and murders terrorized Los Angeles. Richard Ramirez, nicknamed the Night Stalker, was noted for referencing Satan not only during his crimes, but also in his court appearance, drawing a pentagram on his hand and yelling, "Hail Satan!" Around the same time, ABC's 2020 had aired an episode, The Devil Worshippers, in which they examined Satanism in several forms, referring to bands as blatantly satanic, and talking to many loosely accredited professionals about satanic ritual abuse. In 1989, the same year as the conviction of Ramirez, Michelle Smith of Michelle Remembers would appear on Oprah Winfrey's show. Alongside her was Laurel Wilson, who had written her equally fictitious accounts of satanic abuse in the book Satan's Underground only 1 year earlier in 1988. Graffiti of satanic imagery would appear in local streets and parks, forged by pranksters and heavy metal fans. This satire would further the media coverage and spread misinformation, now with what seemed like tangible evidence of the spread of satanic cults. These people, the satanic cultists, could be anywhere, even in your neighbourhood. the television would say. Cases such as the murder of a high school student by his fellow classmates would be blamed on Satanism and referred to as a cult-like slaying. The murderer's record collection of heavy metal music and satanic graffiti would both be taken into account, which would lead to more serious stigmatization and persecution of both heavy metal bands and their fans. A bizarre case occurred in 1988, while the daycare cases were still in court. Paul Ingram, Chief Civil Deputy of the Sheriff's Department, was accused by his daughters of sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. Ingram was then interrogated by local authority and, through suggestion, confessed based on false memories. It's believed that Ingram's membership of a local Pentecostal church allowed him to be susceptible to such psychological suggestion due to the church's belief that Satan can control minds and remove any memory of the acts committed. Ingram would later be found guilty and sentenced to 20 years for the falsely accused sexual abuse of his children. Ingram would serve his sentence until release in 2003. This case would become the subject of a book named Remembering Satan by Lawrence Wright. In the UK in 1990, there had been a campaign of satanic ritual abuse stories across Britain, although it escalated into a series of accusations against parents in Rockdale, North Manchester, and Pembroke, Wales. The Rockdale cases were instigated by 2 social workers that led to 20 children being removed from their homes with no immediate explanation. After a year, the cases were dropped once police and prosecutors found no evidence of wrongdoing. The action taken caused effects on the families involved, including stress and parents separating. Back in the US, the court cases involving Satanism escalated to a peak in 1994. The West Memphis 3 was a trial in which 3 young men were accused and found guilty of the murder of 3 boys. The court case would accuse the young men of killing the boys in a satanic ritual, leading to the sentencing of life imprisonment for Jesse Miskelly Jr. and Jason Baldwin, and a death sentence for Damien Eccles. New DNA evidence and a complicated plea deal led to the release of the men in 2011. The Satanic Panic is a topic that continues to be studied, and is a noted cultural phenomenon as it sets an example of mass hysteria and has been referred to as a case of subversion ideology. To paraphrase Mary DeYoung of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, this can be defined as a culturally constructed myth that manifests the feelings of anxiety and uncertainty about the future during periods of social change. These targets take form as a group, organization, race, or a cult that prey on the innocent. A few historical examples being witches, Native Americans, and Jewish people. Through this thinking, the sociological view is that by drawing attention to an evil entity, it allowed the culture to pause and recognize more widespread forms of child abuse. The end result of a subversive ideology is to create a stabilizing effect on a society going through change. If this were the case, the process unfortunately damaged many lives and left a lasting prejudice that still exists internationally. Thank you for watching, and please do subscribe if you want to see more.